Hey everybody, Alex the Critic here, and welcome to another installment of Cancerous One-Shots, the series where I respond to a stupid part of a video that I found on the internet. Before I get started with this commentary, there are a few things that I'd like to go over first. On Christmas Day 2022, the slideshow commentator Doodletones uploaded her long-awaited Worst Commentaries of 2022 list. Within about a day or two of the video going up, however, she unlisted it from her channel. Why? Well, because the list was heavily flawed. And that's not just my ego talking. Doodletones herself put out both a Twitter thread and a YouTube community post in which she attested to the list being bad and shared a video critiquing her list that was made by a fellow slideshow commentator named Pink Robot, which is a pretty damn respectable move. Now, for those of you wondering what the hell any of that has to do with this commentary, it's because Doodletones put a certain video from yours truly on the list, and as you can imagine, there were plenty of issues I took with the things she had to say about it. I'd like to explain what those issues are, but since Doodletones conceded to the list being bad, I'm going to try to take it easy on her in this video. The key word being try. Alright, first of all, I take immense issue with my video only reaching the 4th spot on this list, as well as with my segment only being 6 minutes long. I mean, come on, the silhouette of my profile picture is in the thumbnail for this entire list. You'd think my video would at least make the top 3, and that Susie would dedicate way more time to talking about it. For the slow kids in my audience, I'm joking.
One of the most out there things to come out of this year was, surprisingly, from the mysterious Mr. Enter, who released a review of Disney's Turning Red. It was one of the few times I saw Twitter come together in a mostly common consensus that the review was pretty head-ass, but also pretty funny for all the wrong reasons. While some people certainly took it too far, and I remember calling that out myself on Twitter during the initial fire, I, generally speaking, took little issue with people clowning on the want for the 9/11 terrorist attacks to be acknowledged in a kids' film.
Firstly, I want to let it be known that I agree 100% with this tweet. You heard that right. I actually agree with something Doodletones said. In fact, if I'd come across this tweet while I was producing my video about Mr. Enter's Turning Red review, I would have included it in the section where I talk about the reasonable takes people had about his video. Make of that what you will. Secondly, I, generally speaking, took little issue with people clowning on the want for the 9/11 terrorist attacks to be acknowledged in a kids' film. Again with this claim that Mr. Enter wanted 9/11 to be acknowledged in a kids' film. That was not what he said. Mr. Enter was merely using the attacks as a frame of reference for his argument that Turning Red did not accurately depict the early 2000s. At best, you could argue that he wanted the impact of 9/11 to be acknowledged, but even then, all that would really amount to is the film having a muted color scheme and a generally drearier tone. Should he have used 9/11 as his frame of reference? No, but that's different from saying that he wanted the film to acknowledge the attacks, which is what Doodletones just said here.
However, I'm merely one person, and maybe not everyone agreed with the bandwagoning of Mr. Enter. One such individual makes this entry, who is a commentator I've known about for a handful of years now, called Alex the Critic.
Alright, this is admittedly a nitpick, but the petty asshole inside me won't let me make this video without clarifying this first. I am not a commentator. I'm a cartoon reviewer who just happens to make the occasional commentary. 5 of the last 6 videos of mine have been cartoon reviews, for crying out loud. If I were a Let's Play channel who made the occasional vlog about hockey, would you call me a hockey YouTuber? Obviously not, so get the labels right, nigga.
Who made 2 videos on the subject. An initial one defending Mr. Enter's review, and then a follow-up on the SCC once they caught wind of Alex's head-assery.
I think what you meant to say there was once he caught wind of us making an ass of ourselves.
Technically, Technically, out of the two, I consider the latter to be worse, but not only does it become a video somewhat on me at a point, so it's ineligible for this year.
That is a crock of shit if I ever heard one. The video was almost 2 hours long, and of those 2 hours, only 48 minutes were devoted exclusively to responding to you. That's not even half of the runtime. Not only that, but one of the videos that did make your list, which was your co-op with Just a Robot, in which you two covered the Names Junkies video about the Toby drama, was a video that you yourself admitted was decent, all things considered.
Again, I'll admit, it's definitely not the worst video I've seen this year, though I'd maybe call it the messiest co-op I've been a part of since Joshua Colby House. But that said, it wouldn't even begin to scrape my top 10 worst had the circumstances been different. Because generally I think the video is fine. It's flawed, but it serves its purpose well enough as both a critique of the Names Junkies video and of the situations surrounding Toby Majestic as a whole.
Surely, if there are so few decent candidates for your worst commentaries of the year list that you're actively putting videos that you don't even think are that bad on it, you'd think the better option here would be to do away with your arbitrary ass rule about only putting one video covering you on the list. That way, you could put my SCC commentary on the list and tear it a new one like you so clearly want to, considering how you talked about the videos that were made on you this year earlier in the list.
With that said, the fact that this could only make this list because I excluded most of the videos on me should tell you what makes this year so frustrating for me, because I'm not impossible to cover. In fact, I oftentimes release videos that can be rather flawed, with this one is a pretty good example of that fact. But all of the content that tried to criticize me this year didn't, and instead spent a good chunk of the time being reductionist, taking me out of context, or just flat out trolling trying to bully me into submission. It's beyond tiring.
Instead of making up some bullshit excuse about how my second video essentially became a response to me. Because the latter move makes you look like a clown who, ironically enough, cannot address criticism.
But also, I don't really care to talk about anti-vax narratives, and that's like the whole second half of the video.
Oh my god, what fucking anti-vax narratives? Throw me a bone, you guys. Work with me here. How is saying that the government shouldn't be forcing people to get any kind of vaccine, and that I personally will not be getting the one for the coof because I question its efficacy, the exact same as saying that all vaccines are bad and dangerous for you and nobody should take them under any circumstances? You know what? Let's take this one step further. Back in April of 2020, when the pandemic first started, I hosted a live stream in which I raised money for the charity organization Hope from Home, whose many initiatives included funding the creation of the COVID-19 vaccine. For somebody who's anti-vax, isn't it weird how I willingly raised $50 for an organization that helped fund the creation of the fucking vaccine? I also took the bacterial meningitis vaccine just so that I could attend college. So clearly I must not be that great of an anti-vaxxer if I'm still willing to get some of them. At this point, anybody who claims that I was pushing anti-vax talking points in either my Mr. Enter video or my SCC commentary is just a flat-out liar.
So instead, I'll just slap on the initial video, but it's not like it's gonna much matter. A lot of my complaints are the same anyway.
Let's also not forget the fact that Enter's issue with the film setting isn't left at the visuals are too colorful. He also mentions how some of the actions that the characters take in the film wouldn't be tolerated in the real world at the time.
Alex kind of reminds me of that kid Douglas a bit, specifically in regards to the passively spiteful approach that can turn aggressive when provoked.
Before I make my point, I would just like to say one thing. It is perfectly acceptable to take issue with the way that I articulate my arguments. That is all well and good. I just find it funny that Doodletones' first criticism of me is of the way I say things. I mean, if I were the one making this segment, I'd want to open it up by maybe refuting an argument or debunking a point, but that's just me.
and his need to take things out of context or misconstrue a narrative to make himself seem smart.
Quite the thing to say after you literally finished misconstruing my SCC commentary by claiming that the second half of it was filled with anti-vax narratives.
But also, I don't really care to talk about anti-vax narratives, and that's like the whole second half of the video.
Despite the fact that the last fourth of it is dedicated to responding to Barrel Cord, whose offending arguments had nothing to do with the vaccine. Irony, thy name is Doodletones.
Which, as someone who's off and on checked up on Alex during his earlier commentaries, frankly I'm a little disappointed.
Curses! If only I didn't think for myself. Had I just merely fallen into lockstep with the people that were clowning on Mr. Enter for his Turning Red review, then maybe I wouldn't have disappointed Doodletone so much. Once again, that was a joke.
Like, I've ribbed at some of his earlier work and some of the strange wording he had back then, but it wouldn't have crossed my mind to call him outright dishonest like I can in this video.
Excuse me, Susie, what was it you said only about a minute ago?
But also, I don't really care to talk about anti-vax narratives, and that's like the whole second half of the video.
You cannot say something that dishonest and then try to criticize me for being dishonest. But you know what? Let's hear Doodletones out. Given that her segment on me is only about 6 minutes long, I betcha she only put in the most damning parts of my video to illustrate her point.
For context, Alex goes through a number of tweets relating to the situation, which I want to clarify, not a big deal, until you notice that some of the tweets he specifically points to are either jokes he takes way too seriously, such as the case was with Bennett the Human.
Okay, never mind, I was wrong.
You know, Doodletones, if you wanted to prove to your audience that I took a joke far too seriously, then you should maybe consider showing an extra tweet or so where Bennett points out to me that the original tweet was a joke, or at least explain how the fuck it's a joke. Because as is, you're leaving it to the viewer to just blindly agree with you that the tweet is obviously a joke. That being said, I respectfully disagree with you that it should have been obvious that Bennett was joking. Anyone who reads this tweet is going to come away with the impression that Bennett is making a legitimate argument about Mr. Enter's veracity as a media reviewer. He may be stating his point in a humorous fashion, but that wouldn't mean that he's not making a serious point. For example, say I posted a tweet in response to a flat earther named Dave, and in this tweet, I said something along the lines of, Dave is the kind of person to say that once an object is placed under a bedsheet, it's just gone forever. Yes, I'm poking fun at Dave for his stupidity, but I'm also making a point about his stupidity. Plus, there's no real setup for this supposed joke. Bennett doesn't explain who Mr. Enter is or why he's saying this about him, so again, anyone who reads this tweet is going to reasonably conclude that he's making a legitimate point about the guy for something he said.
Or we're a part of a much larger thread with way more nuance than Alex gives them credit for.
Again, considering how short her segment on me is, I can only imagine that she's going to show us the most blatant example of my dishonesty. Oh boy, I can't wait to see what it is!
As an example, the tweet from Nerdy Sasquatch spotlighted in Alex's video is taken so far out of context from the initial point, it's insane. Cause Alex claims that Nerdy was straight up calling Mr. Enter alt-right.
Mr. Enter, along with the likes of Nostalgia Critic, CinemaSins, The Quartering, and many other alt-right griftubers, have done so much damage to the art of film criticism and have made the discourse surrounding cinema and pop culture even more toxic. Imagine being called an alt-right grifter simply for having a disagreeable take on a movie.
But when you actually go to check the thread itself, they clarify that they weren't calling Mr. Enter alt-right, but rather using him in tandem with alt-right grifttubers as an example of toxic media critique.
What?
But when you actually go to check the thread itself, they clarify that they weren't calling Mr. Enter alt-right, but rather using him in tandem with alt-right grifttubers as an example of toxic media critique.
What?
But when you actually go to check the thread itself, they clarify that they weren't calling Mr. Enter alt-right, but rather using him in tandem with alt-right grift tubers as an example of toxic media critique.
Dumbass! How much of a dumbass are you?
You're fucking with me, right? Please tell me you're fucking with me, because I don't want to live in a world where people are this stupid and weaselly. Alright, let's go into why this point is, to put it mildly, bad.
Read Sasquatch's original tweet, and I mean really read it. He states, quote, Mr. Enter, along with the likes of Nostalgia Critic, Cinema Sins, The Quivering, and many other alt-right grift tubers. He straight up said other, a word you only use in this context when you're lumping people into a group. I don't care how little of an education you have. Nerdy Sasquatch is clearly labeling these reviewers as alt-right grifters. And this follow-up tweet that you claim absolves him of wrongdoing doesn't actually absolve him of wrongdoing. If anything, he puts the onus on the readers for, quote, misreading his tweet when it is entirely his fault that there was anything to misread in the first place. In other words, he's trying to bullshit his way out of conceding that he did call all of those reviewers alt-right grifters.
Actually, let me change a few of the words in Nerdy Sasquatch's tweet so that you guys can fully appreciate just how insane Doodletones' counter-argument is.
Doodletones, along with the likes of Barrelcord, Boonslayer, Fractured Light, and many other neo-Nazi grifters, have done so much damage to the art of video commentary and have made the discourse surrounding internet drama even more toxic.
I guarantee you that if I put out a tweet like that, the SCC would be on my ass like flies on dog shit. And you know what? They would be absolutely justified in doing so, because I call Doodletones and her fellow slideshow commentators neo-Nazis when they aren't. This is incredible. I mean, I knew Susie's arguments weren't gonna be good, but I didn't expect them to be this brain dead. I shouldn't even have to finish responding to the rest of this segment. I could stop the commentary right here, and people would be like, yeah, Alex won the argument. However, because I love you guys and hate my own sanity, I will. So please, Doodletones, show us what more you have in store for me.
It's an entirely separate conversation, but Alex argues as if that tweet stands on its own.
An entirely separate conversation? What in the Sam flippin' hell are you talking about, woman?
Nerdy Sasquatch's thread is only 3 tweets long, and one of those tweets is just him promoting his other shit, which makes it completely irrelevant to the point at hand. That's not a fucking conversation, that's barely even a thought. I could understand if his tweets were part of a longer argument he was having with somebody else about Mr. Enter's review, or if he actually owned up to calling Mr. Enter an alt-right grifter, but they weren't, and he didn't. So I think it was perfectly fair of me to take the original tweet on its own.
And while you can argue that the clarification that Nerdy wasn't calling Mr. Enter alt-right wasn't made for 6 hours, something that wouldn't have been shown in Alex's video, mind you, that still doesn't put him in the clear when that clarification was made an hour before Alex even got the screen cap to put in his video. So this was just negligence, at best.
Okay, I'll give Doodletones half a point here, because I should have stopped to check if Nerdy Sasquatch did in fact clarify what he meant in his original tweet. However, since his follow-up tweet wasn't an actual clarification like Doodletones claims it was, my original argument is still valid and Susie is still a moron for saying otherwise.
Now, as bad as Doodletones' segment on me has been thus far, it's actually about to get far worse. How so? Because she straight up starts reiterating arguments that she made at the beginning of my drama with the SCC. Arguments that I already responded to in my commentary on the SCC months ago. Don't believe me? Well then, how about I show you the rest of the segment and then play the clips from my commentary where I very clearly respond to the points that are being made.
But then you have arguments like he makes against Beryl Cord, and it becomes significantly harder to justify that benefit of doubt, because he claims Beryl goes on to take Enter out of context, where not only does he not prove that notion within his video,
Quote, you didn't go and play the clip in your video either, so we're just gonna claim that I took Enter out of context with zero actual evidence.
Hey genius, when you're the one making a positive claim, the burden of proof is on you. I don't have to play anything. This would be like getting mad at atheists for not disproving the existence of God.
but she left a fucking timestamp to the full context in the very next tweet as a source?
That's cool, that's smart, that's not a totally dishonest argumentative tactic. Ironic, since you didn't cover my context or thread either. Just the one tweet of me pointing out the funny outdatedness because it was easy to dismiss in a brain-dead bout of white knighting. Which isn't something that I throw around lightly, but I honestly think is appropriate here.
Now, before I address this point, I would just like to make a formal apology to Beryl Cord. Yes, I am apologizing to you because I cut you out of context in my video, and that was wrong of me. In the future, I will make sure that there are more to people's tweets before I respond to them in a YouTube video. Allow me to explain why I didn't cover the rest of Beryl Cord's tweet in my original video.
The more perceptive of you might have caught a key difference between Beryl Cord's screenshot of their original tweet and my screenshot of their original tweet. For those of you who aren't that perceptive, allow me to explain the difference. My screenshot of Beryl Cord's tweet doesn't have that little line that tweets typically have when they're part of a thread. That's because I grabbed the tweet from the trending tab back when Mr. Enter's Turning Red review was trending. For anybody who doesn't know, if you view tweets on the trending tab, they're stripped of said little line even if they are a part of a wider thread. To illustrate what I mean, here is a screenshot I took of a random Twitter thread. You see that little line underneath this user's profile picture? This indicates to you, the reader, that this tweet is part of a thread. However, here are some screenshots I took of some tweets that I grabbed from the trending tab. Notice anything missing? That's right, none of them have that little line underneath the profile picture in spite of the fact that they may be part of a larger thread. Kind of like how my original screenshot of Beryl Cord's tweet has no line underneath it.
That's right. There was no way for me to know that there was more to your tweet because Twitter didn't let me know that there was more to your tweet. Better still, you didn't make it obvious that there was more to your tweet, so as far as I was aware, you just posted this one tweet and then fucked off. Just to debunk the people who will argue that I merely photoshopped the tweet in order to fit my narrative, let's take a look at the file on my phone and see when it was taken. Alright, here's the original tweet, and here is when this tweet was screenshotted. April 15th. Remind me again when Mr. Enter's review of Turning Red was uploaded? Oh yeah, April 14th.
As for why I didn't just check to see if there was more to Beryl Cord's tweet anyways, that was because I was quickly grabbing the dumbest tweets I could find about Mr. Enter from the trending tab, as I had wanted to get the video out as soon as possible. Does that excuse me cutting them out of context? No.
It's really sad when you have to resort to repeating months-old arguments that have already been responded to. Then again, considering how awful Doodletones' new arguments against me were, maybe this was the best move she could have made in terms of not looking like more of a moron.
Never mind how the argument itself against Beryl amounts to, that quote is old, don't use things from years ago.
No, my point was that Mr. Enter changing his mind about Twitter mobs wouldn't make him a hypocrite, which is what I thought Beryl Cord was arguing. corporations have made complete 180 moves, and people have lost everything they've earned because of a Twitter hate mob. If your name is trending on Twitter, it's never a good thing. Mr. Enter 2019. Now that he's the one in hot water, he's directly saying the opposite. 1. You're only providing a snippet of a quote from Mr. Enter, which means you're taking him out of context. 2. That quote was from 3 fucking years ago, which means that either Enter has obviously changed his mind about Twitter mobs, or he didn't account for Twitter mobs that form for bullshit reasons like this one, neither of which would make him a hypocrite. Try again. So that's 2 for 2 in terms of Doodletones misconstruing my arguments. One more and I get a free sandwich at Subway.
Something that rings incredibly hollow when he just finished berating Animat in the very same video for his beef with Yoshi Player from 2017.
Weren't you also the same nigga who blocked people for giving you constructive criticism?
Ever since Animat has started this whole Sony animation hatred thing, a lot of people have been calling him out on his behavior, and quite frankly, the way he responds to people is actually pretty damn negative.
Alright, I could play the response I gave to Barrelcord when they tried to make this exact same argument, but you guys would be here for like 10 minutes, so let me summarize it instead. My criticism of Animat was of his lack of self-awareness and hypocrisy. A criticism that seems pretty fair when you consider that Animat still does the things people criticized him for. How exactly does any of that contradict my point about how Mr. Enter wouldn't be a hypocrite for changing his mind about a single opinion he has? The answer is, it doesn't.
I'd normally end the video here and go into my final thoughts, but there's one more point from Susie's segment on me that I'd like to respond to.
Alex went on to talk about integrity in the comments section, replying to a comment Takumu made, talking about how it's cowardly to not go and confront someone directly about their points, snidely alluding to me as his example after I voiced some distaste for the video in a subtweet.
This isn't the point I was talking about, but I would just like to point out how Doodletones admitted that I did mention her in my original reply to Akumu's comment on my Mr. Enter video. I really love that she did that, and it's because by doing so, that argument she made back in April about how I was just as bad as her for not name dropping her in my comment goes right out the fucking window. If there was ever a time where you'd want to remember what you were arguing months ago, this would have been it.
But what he doesn't realize is that his whole video is indirectly confronting the points people made on Twitter. Like, he can claim that he's directly putting the tweets in a video and addressing them that way, but people like Bennett and Beryl and Lychee, 3 people I know who were mentioned in this video, didn't even know until word got out in the SEC about it. That's not exactly confrontation, my man. It effectively functions in the same way as a subtweet does.
Alright, it's time to walk Susie through a little thing called basic logic.
If person A posts a tweet making an argument about an opinion shared by person C, and person B makes a YouTube video attempting to refute the argument being put forth by person A, do you know what we call that? Confrontation. It might not be direct confrontation, but by responding to person A's argument, person B is confronting them. To be entirely fair though, I can't necessarily fault Doodletones for making this argument. As I said to Fractured Light in my SCC commentary, the point I made in my reply to Akumu's comment on my Mr. Enter video was poorly worded. What I had meant to say was that while I would prefer it if people came to me directly with their critiques of my content so that we can have a debate about the merit of those critiques, doing so is not a requirement. However, if you are going to shit talk me on another social media platform, then at least have the balls to be specific about who you're discussing, because not doing that is a bitch-made move that only people who lack integrity would make. You see, Nerdy Sasquatch, that is how you properly address a mistake you made in your wording. Not by hand-waving it away in the hopes that people will be too stupid to remember what it is you said, but by admitting to it.
Before I move on to my final thoughts, I would like to quickly respond to a funny comment from a certain slideshow commentator that I stumbled across while watching Doodletones' video.
Oh yeah, fuck. I forgot that Alex the Critic used the N-word. You moving weird, bro.
Jesus Christ, you people are such fucking pussies. First of all, I did not say the N-word. I said nigga. There is a difference, there always has been a difference, and no amount of pearl clutching from you or Master TP10 is going to change that. Second of all,
Hispanic.
Kids say nigga.
Hispanic.
Kids say nigga.
Hispanic.
Kids say nigga.
Hispanic.
Kids say nigga. They probably gon' say it anyway. They already say it every day.
Hispanic.
Girls, I ain't tripping, boo.
Hispanic.
Man, be my nigga too.
Alright, here are my final thoughts. Doodletones, I think you and I can both agree that this list was heavily flawed, if not outright bad. But it didn't have to be. There was a very simple way for you to avoid looking like a clown. That would have been to get rid of that stupid ass rule about only putting one video covering you on it and just do the damn list how you wanted to instead of forcing yourself to put videos that you admit weren't that bad on it. How are we supposed to take a video titled Worst Commentaries of 2022 seriously if the videos that are on the list aren't even the worst of the year? As for your segment on me, there was another simple way to avoid looking like a clown. That would have been to watch both of my videos before sitting down to record your script. By not doing that, you ended up lying about one of my videos, which is really funny when you just got onto my ass for being a dishonest person and making garbage points about the other one, which I hope I've illustrated well enough with this commentary. It also would have helped if you didn't repeat arguments that I responded to months ago, but I digress. Let's hope that next year's list isn't so laughable.
I'm Alex the Critic, and if you guys love this utter thrashing of a slideshow commentator, then you're absolutely going to love my next video, which is going to be a commentary on the Affromentator. Until then, I'll see you guys next time.